a memorial public, and then just a little discussion on the transition of the commission, and then jump into Simran and Shafin doing some inquiry about the path forward. So I'm going to continue and just let everyone know that this is now being recorded, and this is the Racial Equity and Policing Commission Policy and Practices Subcommittee. Today is March 31st, 2021, and this meeting is available on the Salt Lake City's website and slcrepcommission.com. And so with that said, again, we can have that discussion about that joint resolution when MJ gets on to give us an overview and a brief discussion on transition and what that might look like in June, but wanted to give some space for Commissioner Shiflett and others to talk about their thoughts, feelings on their experiences this week. And Commissioner Shiflett.
Actually, I thank you very much. I also wanted to acknowledge, and I know that we are watching the trial this week, but what I saw happen in New York yesterday to that elderly woman by an African-American man, and the people who shut the door, the business owners who shut the door, that's also just very disturbing. And as I was reading the resolution, you know, it says things have been heightened by COVID. And I know we have to be politically correct, but there were other things that heightened the way the country is right now. And I don't know if we can put that in there, but the vibe of the country is so mean and nasty and ugly towards people. That lady was going to church. She was just going to church. And I'm just so sick of it. I heard they did catch him, and I'm glad they caught him. But it's just getting to be ridiculous. And then to what Commissioner McDonald and Johnson said, I did a presentation this week, and when we were talking about skin tone, it's amazing how many people, you're right, do not know that even within our own culture, it's a divide. And that's because of systemic racism. We've been taught that you are better than if you're lighter skin, you are darker than if you're dark, I mean, you're worse than if you're darker skin. And we've just got to get this, we got to come together as a people and stop people from treating us as people of color in the way that they treat us in this country. That's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Shiflett. Go ahead.
Do you mind? Can you hear me okay? I'm traveling, and these meetings are important to me, and I wanted to make sure to check in today. I'm on my iPad, so I look a little awkward, and the wind is blowing, so I'm concerned won't be able to speak very well or clearly because of those challenges. I do have my headphones on, and I can hear beautifully, and I just wanted to say thank you for letting me sit in and listen to this beautiful conversation. It's so powerful, and it's so important. And because of my traveling circumstances, I'm going to be less engaged today. And I wanted to make sure that you all know that I'm not stepping back because of the content or the emotion. It draws me closer. But my circumstances are that I'll be more watching and listening than participatory. Thank you all for the gift of being a part of this conversation. And I'm gonna try to put my camera down so it doesn't make you all motion sick. But thank you very much. And I'll be more reserved, and maybe others will have a chance to speak.
Commissioner, we can hear you pretty well. So just that you know, I did not see the disturbance. So thank you for, and if the trees are real, then it's thank you for bringing nature to us.
Exactly. Beautiful.
Shafin, good to see you, brother.
Good to see you. Good to be with everybody today. Yeah, I just want to say I'm just resonating when I kind of walk into this space here, and listening to the comments. I'm just like, wow. It just it feels good to connect with people that are experiencing similar things, and feeling similarly about the world. You know, getting from the frustration to the pain, and Commissioner Johnson, you know, just talking about, and McDonald talking about, even within there's so many different layers of things that we need to focus on. There's a lot of internal work that we have to do, even, you know, like unlearning, you know, unpacking, and, you know, within our own race, you know, like just you talked about that. I mean, I could have a full-on conversation about my father's conversation with me, and that, and my issues growing up, you know, wanting to have different kind of hair or whatever it was. So yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. And then just reliving the trial and reliving this moment with George Floyd, it's just been like, for me, you know, it's been impactful, you know, quite frankly. I'm like, wow, like, okay, like we're doing this. And it's almost like you have anxiety because you don't know what the outcome is going to be. As much as it looks like or sounds like it's going a certain way, it's like, yeah, are you getting it? You're hearing it, you're getting it. You know, I still don't know, like, quite frankly. So I'm going to I have to like manage myself emotionally. So I'm just saying that and putting that out there because, you know, we're all sharing, and thank you for, you know, for the honesty and for the opportunity to share a bit in this space. I appreciate that.
And managing yourself emotionally in itself is a form of abuse in itself, because now, and mental health. So now you've got to manage, and that's why I did that masculinity thing this summer, because for Black men to have to continually manage themselves, I mean, Black women do it, we kind of do it innately, but for Black men, it's hard. And it just bothers me that you have to maneuver these spaces and jump through these hoops to appease everyone else. And, you know, the first day my friend said to me, it doesn't look good. And she's Greek. And just to hear her say that, you know, I'm hopeful over here, praying and hopeful. And she's like, Carol, I just don't think it's going to go in his favor because, again, they put him on trial.
Yeah.
So,
Thank
anyway.
you for saying that. But just the fact that you recognize that is actually cathartic in a sense, you know, so thank you for saying that and highlighting that and bringing that forward.
I'll be calling on you for one of my conferences.
I'm here.
I'll raise a minor, for me, minor, not exactly minor point, but it's a point. And I chatted with Josh privately, so I want to share with everybody. I asked Mr. King if recording facilitates our conversation or alters our open conversation. And I just want to have a 1-minute conversation about it and see if I didn't see a space for all of us to chat, to contribute about it. I personally will be perfectly fine without recording, and I'm okay with it if you all are okay with it. I just want to see if what the commissioners who are present prefer and for this conversation. And if you please make a comment, we'll appreciate it and we'll accordingly handle this. Josh, am I misstating anything or?
Yeah, if I understand correctly, and I think, and Kira can chime in from the city, the commission prefers full transparency. If we feel like we can be more productive and move a few discussions forward without recording it, that's up to the discretion of the subcommittee. Since they are not a full quorum of the full commission, they have that discretion to record their subcommittee meetings or not.
I have no opinion.
Okay. Thank you, Darlene. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm fine recording or not. I don't feel
Okay.
I'm the same way. I mean, sometimes you need to hear it and sometimes you don't. So whatever you do is fine with me.
Okay. You're muted, Commissioner Johnson.
Seems like he's in a business meeting.
Yeah, he's been talking for a minute.
He has, yeah.
Yeah, Commissioner other Johnson.
Other Johnson.
Or the other Steve, Commissioner Steve Andrew. Our first, as an example, our first meeting with Chaffin and Cimarron was not recorded. The second one was because I think we had it at a regular subcommittee time and you all elected to do that. And so with Chaffin, Cimarron leading us for the most part in our discussion today, I wanted to give them deference. So Steve Andrew.
I'm fine to not record it. I think you've discussed the issues that we wanted to make sure we had full transparency and accountability for our work. I think we accomplished that in our full commission meetings, and particularly since all of our recommendations will go through those full meetings, so there'll be a full discussion that's recorded. I'm comfortable not doing it. Again, it was a discretion of this subcommittee to ensure that the accountability to our community was present. I think we still cover that. I don't have strong feelings either way.
Kara?
I'm happy to do whatever the subcommittee prefers. The subcommittees are not legally required to record. There has been a precedent and general public communications that subcommittees meetings are recorded. So staff would appreciate if you opt not to, any direction on what you would like posted where the recordings usually are. By which I mean specifically if you would like any messaging as to how this helps serve the committee's purpose by not providing a recording for this particular session. I'm
Oh, I see.
happy to carry that forward.
Shafin?
You know, we're here to facilitate for all of you all, right? So, you know, if it's, and I want to be of the best service and highest use to that end goal. And so, you know, we started off talking about a really sensitive topic, and I know it can be emotional. And, you know, oftentimes I find that, you know, different people have different levels of comfort depending on if it's being recorded or if it's not, or what the environment might be. And so I'm going to defer really to the commission. So I'm okay either way. I really am here as a way of, I appreciate it being brought up, because I think for us to create a space that's safe, we have to ask, is this a safe space? You know, what can make it more safe for us to have the kind of conversation that we need to have? So thank you.
Perhaps we should move forward to not record it.
One consideration, I think we have great support with myself, Kira, and Hassan, who's also on the call taking notes, which we'll rely on as we move into the next phase, because I have had several discussions with the chief this week, and it's a tough week with a lot of people being out of town, including himself and others that we might want to bring onto the call. If we feel like through our notes we can give them background and requests of what we need, then yeah, I don't have any issue with not recording it. We did talk about if we might come to some recommendations regarding the co-response program and responding to calls, then he's willing to come on with Chief Doubt, who's also out of town now. Also Lisa Burnett, who takes calls that come in the 911 center, and Jessica Waters, who runs the dispatch program, I believe. And so anyway, getting us the key players from point of crisis to when a cop shows up. So if you guys think it's beneficial they have the recordings, then we can record it. If we think our notes suffice and the proper questions are framed to get to them, then that will suffice as well. Just one consideration.
Is this something that we could revisit after we think about it?
Whether to record today or not?
Well, record ongoing. Today,
sure.
I mean ongoing. Part of me says it needs to be heard.
Okay.
Part of me says we're transparent. But the meeting was supposed to start at 4:30, and I don't know if that was official or unofficial. That's the thing. So if it's supposed to be official, then we don't record it when we get to the official part. But I speak from my heart, and it may come out in the official meeting, the same thing that I said when we were unofficially talking. So.
Well, we've been recording. So what I hear from Kira is how we message, whether we post it and whether we don't. is up to the commission, right, Kira? Okay.
Correct. I could also stop the recording now if the subcommittee requests that as well.
I'd like to hear from Officer Groves and Scott, what their thoughts are as well.
Personally, I'm just fine with it being recorded. I've never had anything to hide, and I kind of agree with Carol where transparency, in my opinion, is better than the alternative. So, but I'll support whatever decision's made. But I'm here to help in any way I can from my own perspective, being in law enforcement. So.
Okay.
I apologize. I'm a little bit late. Is this about whether the meeting is going to be recorded?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have an issue. I think it's great that it's recorded that way. I think it holds us to a little bit of accountability that these meetings occur, and that we can go back on what's been said and what hasn't been said, and it allows others to see that we're trying. So yeah, I don't have a problem with this being recorded.
Okay. Professor Singh, how do you feel?
Well, that's fine. It looks like majority of commissioners and people present prefer or have no preference. So it's going towards, I think you should record it. I just want to make sure everybody is comfortable. I don't want a single person here who will not speak up because of the recording. That one voice can be every voice is important to me. So just wanted to say that. So thank you.
Thank you. And working in a context that Subcommittee does, and understanding that, and Chaffin does, a lot of times there are sensitivities around confidentiality, and just ensuring that participants are comfortable with the context and the frame of work of the discussion. So appreciate him bringing that up to understand where the subcommittee is and what they feel comfortable with. So we'll continue with it recording and with our discussions and the transparent group and everybody feeling comfortable about that. MJ was running late. Again, I wanted to have a discussion on the joint resolution. He knows most about that. I'll table that. And then the second item, before I really turn it over to Subcommittee and Chaffin to dive into more discussions building off of last week, was the role of the commission. If I could share my screen real quick. I only have one screen, and so let me know, make sure I'm sharing it. Hold on, give me 1 second. In fact, Cindy Lou, if you have the calendar up, are you on now? You could share that briefly.
Sure, I'm happy to share the calendar.
Just wanted to lay that out as a timeline, and then just and we'll talk about this more fully in full commission, but to get you all thinking about the role of the commission at the end of June and what that might look like. Whether you think the commission should stay intact as it is for a couple more months after that, for a year after that, if you think it'd be healthy to rotate commission seats at the end of June, or if you want to stay in the position to see some implementation. Just wanted to test the temperature of the group and get you thinking about this prior to the next commission meeting. Maybe if you could enlarge that a little bit.
Thank you.
Cindy, that'd probably be good. I know if I can't see it very well, Commissioner Carroll can. All right, is that better, Carol? There we go. All right, so I know it's a commitment to everybody, but just wanted to, for a couple, 3 or 4 minutes, just take the temperature of the group. This is what we're looking at. We talked about last time, final report being in June. You can see on there some of the other meetings and what we're looking at until the end of June. Thoughts on what the role of the commission should be after June and moving forward?
Are you asking us for our thoughts now or to keep it in mind to bring it up during the regular committee?
Either
meeting?
one, Commissioner Shiflett, that's a good clarification. Maybe due to the time, we don't need to dive into it because we're not going to make any determination now, but we'll want to have a more robust discussion as a full commission next week.
That was Commissioner McDonald.
Oh, McDonald, sorry, I can't see anybody now. So
That's quite all right. My thoughts on this would be that once we present the full commission report, is that we not necessarily disband, but go on a hiatus per se, and allow the council, the city council and the city to proceed forward. And then we could do a checkup in maybe about 3 months, getting together and say, okay, do we think they have moved forward with the recommendations? How is everything doing? How are the relationship with the officers? How was it perceived? How was it implemented? And maybe do like a 3, 6, 9, 12 months sort of check in. I mean, that's kind of what I would think, how it would go about.
I don't mind taking a hiatus, but I'm concerned that the country has gone so mad that there's something is gonna happen, something else that may have to be addressed. That's my only concern, because yeah, it would be nice to take July off and maybe part of August, but because this is taxing. This is very taxing, and it would be good to have a little bit of a break. But the way the country is, I know we can't solve the world problems. We can't solve problems across the country. I don't know, but I do agree with what Darlene said. Let them take a look at it. Give us an opinion on what they're thinking about what we're doing, and then come back and address it and maybe talk to them about what we're doing. Because as Darlene said a while ago, Commissioner Johnson, sorry, this is not going to end overnight. It's just not. So I don't know, maybe take July and August off.
okay, good. Other thoughts?
I have one. I'd like to follow up what Carol was saying and what Commissioner McDonald was saying. I wouldn't mind the hiatus and to take a moment to reflect and see exactly, what position everybody takes after the recommendations. And to touch on what Carol said, I do believe that the country has basically outsourced its morality right now, and we don't see it anywhere. So I'd like some time to reflect myself and see where I want to trend or where I want to go. I wouldn't mind being invited back, but I do want to see what kind of results we get with the recommendations that we've already got in place. I know there's more to follow.
Okay. All right, good. Great on the fly responses. And I know you've probably thought about this for a while, but good. Any other thoughts or comments on that? Steve, is that a hand up or are you just moving your screen?
I'm showing off my trees in the background here on this beautiful mid-70s evening. Now, I'd like to get the perspective from the commission. I imagine as commissioners reflect on this year and their role and their futures and their time frames, that there may be some natural turnover and June is probably a good time to revisit that, and whether there's a hiatus or not. I imagine some people may be ready, to serve the community in other ways. And I'd also like to see maybe revisiting. The city built this commission kind of on the fly and in pieces, and sometimes I think our charter isn't as clear as it could be, or what the expectations of the commission could be. I think maybe we could have a conversation and maybe clarify some of that, and with that direction, let people decide if they want to continue to be a part of it. I see that year period as kind of a natural time to make those changes and those edits and restructuring as necessary. So I guess I'm looking for that as a transition phase, as we all reflect on the emotional cost and the time cost and whether we want to continue.
Okay, so what I'm hearing the group kind of a theme at the end of June and leading up and after maybe we have an assessment phase, see where we've been, what we've done, what it might look like more robustly moving forward, but really to take a step back and digest what's been done. All right, before we tie that up, any other thoughts, Commissioner Johnson or others? Okay, welcome back from your.
I'm sorry, I have one quick thought.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think the reflection portion is a good thing, but I also think it's super important to maintain dialogue. I know as a police officer, I want dialogue about what I do, and I want dialogue about what other people feel. So I think maintaining dialogue is extremely important. I would absolutely hate to see the presentations that you make to city council members and to the department, if it's not what was expected of the commission, for this to just dissolve. I think it's important that I don't think just giving up is the answer. I agree on the reflection and maybe seeing what other routes could be taken depending on the results. But I think maintaining an open dialogue is ultimately what's going to build the bridges that we need to build.
Okay. Good. So I think, yeah, you want to keep the momentum going. You want to keep the dialogue open. I know the partner pair program is just getting going. So I hear that's important to keep the momentum.
Maybe as to speak to what Officer Groves had just spoke to, I know that the city is hiring a equity director.
Yeah.
Maybe at that time, it may be appropriate to interface with that person once the recommendations are put in place and there's a roadmap forward, and then once that roadmap is presented, interface with that person and say, okay, have there been any changes implemented, and what does that look like from your perspective as the equity director for the city? And maybe we work with that person more. I mean, this is just me just throwing that out there. And have that dialogue as Officer Groves spoke to. That's the dialogue that we have on an ongoing basis with that person, and making sure that, because racism, I mean, is as old as this country. So this report isn't going to solve or fix any of this, but it's a step and path forward. And are we meeting the moment per se? So that's, I mean, maybe that's the direction we could take to speak to what he just said, because I like what he just said, and there could be a way to be able to do that.
Great, thank you, Commissioner McDonald. And I'd suggest bringing that up on Wednesday, because there has been some discussion about that, and that equity director and the role he or she might play, and if these recommendations could live under that and what that might look like. So I think that's very important to bring into the discussion. Commissioner Johnson has his hand raised, and then we'll try and tie this part of the agenda up. Commissioner Johnson.
I just wanted to say something towards that. What was it, Officer Scott that said that?
Yeah.
I totally agree with that because society and especially here in Utah, it's got the out of sight, out of mind, out of touch kind of climate where if this doesn't continue, then things will be forgotten and it is business as usual. So I do agree with his point of view because if this doesn't continue, I don't see things changing. I see things reverting back to the same that, you know, the commission was formed for. I think we should keep this active and on people's mind. I mean, if we stop,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying, hey, let's just stop and go our merry way, but we do need to keep a dialogue. I believe that, and the new position that Commissioner McDonald was talking about, I didn't get to hear all of that. But how is that process, the choice of that party, what is that process? Does anybody know that process?
No, but we can have the city update the commission more fully on Wednesday to explain that. Commissioner Johnson, sounds like that would be important. What it looks like, where they are with that, would be helpful. Then I think you're articulating a thought I had last week when somebody mentioned we're entering the fourth quarter here, and that is a good metaphor, I think. However, then June 3rd, end of June, the playoffs start, right? Where it really gets important. And so, yeah, what are you going to do? What's the game plan then?
Yeah. But I think Officer Scott is right. We still need to keep an open dialogue on this matter and the topic. And I don't want any of this to be forgotten about.
All right, good. So I hear themes coming through loud and clear. So let's move on. But Commissioner Shiflett had her hand raised, and I'm going to let you have your space.
I just want some clarity. Oh, wait. Yeah. I just wanted some clarity. Are you saying, so don't take the hiatus, just keep going and continue the conversation? Or are you saying when they hire this new person, we can get his perspective on everything that we have talked about? Because I understand what Officer Scott's talking about. You don't want the ball to drop. But I'm going to say, this is exhausting, mentally and emotionally exhausting. And that's what we have in this resolution. You also have to make sure that the health and well-being of the people trying to make this difference, people of color who are speaking up, you got to make sure their mental health is okay too, because it's every single day. It's not when we meet for these meetings. It is every single day that we've got to teach somebody what we're going through, what we're feeling. So I'm not saying, I don't want to cut the dialogue either. I think it's very important, but how do we do that? Do we go ahead and talk to this new person to find out? I kind of like to hear, like, how are they being hired and what is their perspective? What is their background? Yeah. So I'm not sure of how Officer Scott was talking about keeping the dialogue going, but I'm not discounting it as well either.
All right, well, again, let me just note for Kira and Cindy Lou to tag that for an agenda item for the full commission meeting that I'm hearing loud and clear regarding that racial equity position. And then I see Officer Groves has his hand up, so I'll come to him.
Really quick, just to maybe add to Officer Scott, Commissioner McDonald and Shiflett, I fully agree with you that, and it was my assumption as well, that this new racial equity position would be that conduit, that, you know, where the commission would work more directly with them and be that a conduit to officers on the street, as well as the chief's office, city council and whatnot, so that it could be slowed down a bit, because I agree with Commissioner Shiflett that it is taxing, and I'm not here to compare my stress level and my experiences with racism to your own. However, I will say, when I think I do speak for officers when I say it's very stressful for officers as well, not only on the commission level, but on the street. And, you know, there's already talks right now about, you know, with this George Floyd trial, what happens if he isn't fully found guilty and there's acquittals, or there's, you know, a dumbing down of the charges. What's that going to do to social unrest? What's that going to do to officers' lives? who, for the majority of us, we've never done something like that officer did, but yet we feel the effects every day with hateful speech towards us and being spit on, being attacked. I personally have experienced that many times, and so since May of last year, based on the actions of one officer, in Minneapolis. So, well, a few officers, I will say. So there is stress there. It is very taxing. And so as far as how often commissioners meet, obviously I'm not in a position to recommend that to you all, but I would say I agree with Carol, and I think there does need to be give and take there, because it is very taxing emotionally, and time-wise on all of us, in our own silos, in our own respective ways. So I did want to add something real quick though and just share with add to what you guys were saying earlier about the George Floyd trial and the stress and the hate and the just everything, all the emotions that this trial is bringing up again. And I don't speak for every officer, but I think I speak for most when I say it's very hard to watch the actions of those officers, whether or not, if they prove in the court of law that their actions were out of malice, out of hate, if they were racially driven, because none of that has been proven yet. However, I will say the amount of just a lack of human decency and perspective, and the inability for these officers to see the forest through the trees based on what their actions were, to continually kneel on that man, whether or not it was department approved, that technique, because that man was clearly experiencing excited delirium. He was clearly high on fentanyl and other drugs. And I agree with some of the commissioners when they said it shouldn't be, this trial should not be about, George Floyd, about his criminal background. The only thing it should be about is in the terms of what happened that day. And so I do agree with the trial bringing up what his actions were that day that led the police to that call. However, that's where it should stop as far as George Floyd is concerned. The totality of the circumstances, why he was there, why the officers were called there, that is valid and that should be brought up in the courts. However, everything before, doesn't matter what his criminal background was before then, and it shouldn't. And I agree with the commissioners that have stated that it feels like the media is trying to play both sides of that and unfairly put him on trial for those things. And so I just wanted to kind of put my voice in there and share the stress and just the absolute horror of, that most officers feel about what happened, on that day. I would encourage some commissioners though to look at another case, and this doesn't have to be today, but there's a very little known case in 2016 in Dallas, Texas. The Dallas Police Department had something very similar happen. But the problem with, the only difference with this one was his name was Tony Timpa. He died in 2016 and he was a Caucasian man, and very similar circumstances to George Floyd. And he also died of being physically restrained by officers while he was under the effects of, substances, and died of cardiac arrest. And it was also ruled a homicide. But however, 2 of the 3 officers in that case, one was Black, one was Hispanic. And so I would just urge everybody on the commission, everybody in the community to, when this trial goes forward with George Floyd and that officer, I would just encourage you to be more open-minded on the racial aspect of it, and just understand that this has happened more than once across the country with officers restraining people who are under the influence of drugs. And again, I'm in no way minimizing what happened to George Floyd with the neck issue, with everything like that. But when officers deal with people who are under excited delirium, when they're being restrained in that way, and officers are either not trained properly or they don't understand what could happen medically to this person that they're restraining, I would just like to open up that dialogue and just encourage people to understand that it's not always racially motivated when they do restrain. Because like I said, this case where Tony Timpa was killed, 2 of the 3 officers were minorities. That he died at their hands too. And so is it more of a dialogue we need to talk about on this particular George Floyd case? Is it more about officer training, not understanding basic things about what excited delirium is? I just want to bring that out there. I don't want to state this in a divisive way. I just wanted to kind of throw that other angle in the mix, as far as it's a complicated thing on some of these in custody deaths, why they happen. And again, but again, in no way do I agree about what happened to George Floyd. But I just wanted to bring that out, that there's training issues I think that we could bring up too, maybe as a recommendation, things like that.
Yeah, Officer Groves, your input and Officer Scott's is valuable, and we appreciate that. And you ask great questions that the commission has been asking, the subcommittee's been asking, and there is a training subcommittee looking at this, and we did make a joint recommendation last week about the history of policing and training on that. Another topic that we covered goes perhaps to the root, and that is point of crisis. The initial call in and how that is managed and handled. And Chaffin and Suk-Simran last subcommittee meeting asked that we kind of focus in on that area, and maybe we do now, that point of crisis, the beginning, right? And this subcommittee had developed out some thoughts on those 2. And the first one in the materials was, let's look at perhaps developing and funding those connections and collaborations between SLCPD and local mental health or social organizations. And I think, Officer Groves, you had mentioned the relationship between SLCPD and the University of Utah Mental Health Institute, and perhaps expanding funding for that and the relationship. So that's one that I'd like the help of Shaf and Suk-Simran to jump into. What might development of those connections and collaborations look like between SLCPD and those local mental health institutions? And then 2, what does the co-response program look like, and what could it be? On the full commission meeting, Moises gave us a presentation of an example of cahoots, and then we had talked briefly last subcommittee about some other models, and staff shared with us an assessment they did a year ago of some other models, like in Denver and Houston. So Shafin and Suk-Simran, if you could help us out here and kind of lead us in a discussion there, that we could maybe hone in on those 2 areas, like a co-response model, or from point of contact or point of crisis to when a cop shows up, what considerations or thoughts the group might want to hone in on and look at to maybe in some way change outcomes that we're seeing, right?
Can I say just thank you, Josh, for that. But I just want to highlight a couple of things, and we don't need to get into. I want to say thank you to Officer Groves because I feel like oftentimes, we don't get a chance to hear, the other side or another perspective. And if we can't hear about that other perspective, we can't really have a conversation. And so, when you say things like, look, there were African-American officers that were, that were at play in this dynamic as well. So therefore, maybe it's not really about race. And I appreciate that, because it centers a deeper conversation that really should be examined and discussed, that peels back a lot of layers. And I don't know if you were, and I'm not going to, I don't want to divert us, because I know we're trying to be on track here. But earlier in the conversation, we were talking about Commissioner Darlene and Johnson and Shafet. We're talking about even there's a lot of bias or issues within the race of within the race of the Black community. Looking at color. And when you have grown up conditioned to see yourself through the eyes of, let's say, a society that may portray you and perceive you a certain way, and this is how you're learning about yourself, then it's easy to sometimes even adopt that identity, adopt an identity that's other than your own. And you think about law enforcement, whether it's military, whether it's police, whether it's whatever, you have a culture that's extremely powerful at really melding this identity, like removing you from your identity and bringing it into this is what it is. So there's so many different components to that, and I just want to say thank you for bringing it up. I believe that as that kind of honesty kind of highlights things that, hey, we should talk more about that so we can get down to the real root issue. I want to just say that because I appreciate that. That's all. I just wanted to highlight it. So thank you. I know that Josh, you kind of brought us forward to where we left off. And what I wanted to do, and also I wanted to leave space for Dr. Singh as well. If you think we should start at a different point, we can. But my question to all of you was, have we thought about that first bucket, which was like the funding connections, collaborations between SLCPD and the local mental health services? Have we thought about that? How do we feel about that? I know that you guys had the presentation with Cahoots. Did that sound like something that, and other different programs around the country? And does that sound like something that could work for Salt Lake City, or something like a variation of that? What were your thoughts and feelings about that?
I didn't. Did you end? You ended and you broke a little bit. Did you ask me to speak?
Oh yeah. No, if you want to say, I was asking as a general question, but please, if you have something else to add.
I was just adding, Shaf, on one thing. Is I think it's a good time to set some goals for today. What are we going to? How deep are we going to go into a conversation, or going to have multiple conversations? I just want to have that, because we are going really deep into a national dialogue right now, and how does it impact Salt Lake? So that's my only contribution right now, but I think you did a very good framing.
No, I think that's great. I think let's back it up and let's go with that, Dr. Singh. So I guess the question is, what do we have 30 more minutes? Did we want to continue down a path? Like, what do we want to accomplish at this point? Because we have about 30 minutes. So do we want to get into the work here, or do we want to continue along the conversation that I know we're kind of, we're at the surface on? What do you guys want to do?
Let's get down to the work.
Okay.
That's just my opinion.
Okay. Commissioner Johnson wants to delve into it.
Yeah, he speaks my mind.
Excellent.
There you go.
Okay, I'm gonna ask, when you say get down to the work,
okay,
what are you talking about? Because I mean, I think you said what I wanted to say to Officer Groves. The only thing I have to say, I don't know if you're talking about continue that conversation, but for many African Americans, it's always about race. And it's always about race because of the history of this country and how policing started. So I'm not discounting, that there are situations that happen. So when you say, do we want to get down to it, or do we want to continue this conversation? I just need just a little bit more.
My fault. You're right. I apologize, because it's all the work, and you said something too, that it's emotional labor, laborious, when you guys do this. So I was saying, do we want to go to the document and pick up where we last left off? Or do we want to have this? And they're both very important. So like that's the where we last left off in the document, looking at the different funding, the different cap buckets that we're talking about. Or do we want to continue this conversation, because there's a lot to unpack and a lot of meat on the bone here as well, and what you guys are all talking about. So either is okay with us. We're just saying there's 30 more minutes. How did you best want to use it? Okay. And that's what we were referring to.
It would be good to get down to the funding and the mental health, and let's figure out what's going on there. That's just my opinion, like they said.
Can I ask that we set a meeting aside, set time aside, to have the conversation that we're not diving into right now, because we want to get to our agenda. I feel like and I struggle with this, and I have since the beginning of our commission about the conversations we need to have. I feel like we're talking past each other, or we're not super understanding what's being said. I feel like, and I feel like I'm going to ask my BIPOC friends to continue with that emotional grind of explaining more about the position, so our officers have a better understanding of why we're here, where we're coming from. And it's an unfair ask to, for you to continue to make yourselves emotionally vulnerable to have those explanations. But I'm struggling just a little bit to move forward, because I heard Nate's comments, and I also appreciate the courage to put them forward. And I think that we miss, our country didn't become divided between law enforcement and BIPOC communities when George Floyd died. It's been that way. And we're not here because of what a few officers did that day. We're here because of the systemic institutions that we work with, and how we're not serving communities of color the way we need to be serving. And I think that we have to address that issue and look for the ways to undo that, for our recommendations to have that depth that we need them to create the change in our city. And I just think that is such a critical conversation that we have not fully embraced. And I don't think that the two sides really understand each other the way I feel like would be helpful in order to move forward. So I'm willing to put a pin in that and move forward with our meeting today, but I really think that's something that has to be addressed.
Can I, please go.
Isn't that what the training committee is working on? Josh, I know we had that meeting with the officer, can't remember his name now. Are they still working on that component? Like Steve was saying, can we have a separate conversation for this? Is that something that's already taking place, or are they putting it into play to do the historical training? And I don't know what happened with that meeting.
Yeah, I'll let Dr. Singh respond. He had a thought, but just to respond to your direct question, I think there are a couple things at play. One, moving forward, that recommendation of providing training in this area, right? The history of policing, and as Commissioner Andrew Weirden said, it didn't start last year, right? And so that piece of the training and the slideshow we saw from Dante and other things, right? So I think that's moving forward. Other piece I hear is Commissioner Andrew Weirden saying that we continue this dialogue or set time aside for a specific listening session with the commission and law enforcement to talk about these things and discuss them and have that discussion. Is that what I'm hearing you say, Commissioner Andrew Weirden?
Yes, I think it's important, and yes.
Okay.
I'm lost. I don't understand the ask. I apologize. I have not had my daily shot of whiskey yet. I don't understand the ask. So if either Steve or someone could repeat that for me.
All right, I think there's an ask to move along the recommendation for the training subcommittee to move along training on the history of policing, right? But then there's another ask that we set time aside for the commission and law enforcement to have this discussion we've been having about where we were, yeah, how we got here, right? That's very deep. And
Okay.
am I hearing that right? Chaffin, Dr. Singh, are you guys hearing that?
I think you got it right. I wanted to add, Commissioner Steve, I thank you for also bringing it up. All the commissioners, thank you, and Officer Groves, thank you for bringing your perspective and strength to the argument, which as my brother Shafan said, we need to hear and empathize as well. And when we seek empathy, we must give empathy. I just wanted to add 2 cents to what was happening for the last hour. Please take our gratitude with the sense that we know how difficult it is. And I personally think, and I know Shafan, we think this is the conversation that we have as people, as citizens, and as a nation together. This is exactly what we need to have. So I'm feeling guilty right now to push everybody, hey, let's go back to the agenda, which we have discussed last week. I want to respectfully submit, we don't have to. If we can spend next 20 minutes, which is nothing comparing to the conversation we are having. So Shafan, if you're okay, I want to just be correct. We can go into that next. I don't think 20 minutes are enough to go to that agenda item either. So the conversation we were having, Ms. Darlene, the conversation on race in the nation, especially this week and last week, and your perspectives and the officer's perspective, that is a teachable moment for people to see. And especially when it's being recorded, I really wish and pray that people watch and learn from this dialogue, which is so respectful and dignified in my humble lens. Shafan, am I making any sense right now? Please help.
Absolutely. And I feel that's what I was sensing. Like, I was like, this is an important conversation. And, we should, but also I understand, I hear Steve Weirden and Commissioner Weirden as well, that we do need time and space, I think, to actually have this conversation. At the same time, I'm listening, I'm hearing, Commissioner, I feel like I can't see everybody's name here, but we were talking about the emotional labor, of all the whole thing, because I hear the other officers say, but we don't want to lose the momentum and we need to keep going. But they also hear about, like, hey, we need a hiatus to take a break emotionally from this work. And so there's so many things that were being talked about and there's a lot of things that we're not addressing, in that same space. And so I was like, wow, there's so much that we need that's not being addressed. And if we could just talk about that, there might be a different outcome. But yeah.
Things are not being addressed, and usually the discussions we are having are ignored in meetings. So for people like Shafan and me, this is like, wow, we are being open and vulnerable. This is no, thank you, Shafan. I think you said it well. Josh, we need your help, but I personally think we are totally open. Just want to be good servant leaders. We will do what you folks think should be the best use of the time. But this conversation, just that needs to happen.
Yeah, I can opine, and I appreciate the conversation and the discussion. And as we've identified before, if we just had more time, right? If we could just, I enjoy the time. I so hope we can get together in person, but value the time we have now. One thought might be, as I said at the beginning of the call, I've had multiple calls with staff and with Chief Brown, and they're more than willing to get on with us next call and bring the right people in from point of crisis to when a cop shows up, and we can maybe co-create, look at the program and what it looks like, and give recommendations to improvement on that call if we want to continue this dialogue, which might be more in line with that joint resolution that MJ shared. And I think he just jumped on the call. MJ, is that you on the iPhone?
Hey there, everyone. Sorry I was late. Trying to turn my camera on. Just made it back home. How is everyone today?
Good. Maybe with MJ on the call, maybe it'd be worth our time, and this might be in line with the flow of the discussion we've been having, to just talk about that joint resolution, and MJ can give us an overview and we can speak to that and some recommendations related to that. That's my thought.
That would be perfect, actually. That's a very right segue to go into. Thank you.
MJ, how do you, Commissioner
Good
MJ,
timing.
with the wonderful beanie on, are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that right now. Sorry, guys. I'm not prepared to the best of my ability today, although I wanted you guys to review that document. Did my fellow commissioners have a chance to review the resolution sent out? Perfect. So I'll give you a little insight behind that real quick. I've been in contact with some students from the White Coats for Black Lives at the University of Utah, connected through a representative who thought it may be important to continue the work we need to do declaring racism a moral and public health crisis. So essentially, the resolution reads, oops, sorry, just backed out. Whereas this nation, its states and its municipalities were built on a legacy of racism, systematically disadvantaging minoritized racial and ethnic groups. And whereas racist policies and procedures within our governments, private industry, and culture have survived slavery abolition and movements for civil rights. And whereas our culture has deeply ingrained certain physical characteristics that are usually associated with whiteness as a higher value than those physical characteristics of people of color through media, literature, and pop culture, we have discounted the strengths, beauty, and contributions of a large portion of our society to the detriment of us all. And whereas these racist policies, procedures, and cultural biases have created deep and intergenerational inequities that are factual, measurable, and incredibly harmful. And whereas a public health crisis is an emergency preventing individuals and communities from being healthy and thriving. And whereas public health and racism are not separate issues, but are intersected and contribute to systems of oppression and overlap in ways that have proven devastating impacts to the health of our communities. And whereas racism is a key driver for the detriments of health, shaping access to resources such as education, housing, employment, and healthcare that creates opportunities for health. And whereas the outcomes of these inequities can be seen through exposure to environmental toxins, unmet housing needs, problematic police interactions, poor private and public investment, education access, employment opportunity, and multitudes of other health measures. And whereas our awareness of these health inequities and the inequities themselves have been heightened through the global pandemic, where being a person of color has become a risk factor in itself, in addition to exposure and death. And whereas the COVID-19 pandemic has revealed and reaffirmed the pre-existing inequities caused by racism here in Utah. The data shown from the Utah Department of Health reveals that 1, odds of infection were 3 times more likely in high deprivation areas, such as Glendale and and 2 times more likely, such as Rose Park, where there are high percentages of Latinos, immigrants, and other non-white residents. Number 2, outbreaks of COVID-19 in the workplace were disproportionately Hispanic or non-white compared to overall racial ethnic populations. And number 3, the Latino community accounts for, the Latinx community accounts for 14.2% of Utah's population, but 40% of the state's COVID-19 cases. Number 4, Black and African American communities, including immigrant communities, account for 2.1% of Utah's population, but 2.5 of the state's total COVID-19 cases. Number 5, Native American and Alaskan Native communities in Utah had a case fatality rate that is roughly 3 times higher than the state average. Number 6, Pacific Islander and Native Hawaiian communities have the highest mortality rate for COVID-19 out of any other racial ethnic group in the state. And number 7, Asian American communities being affected by the rise in xenophobic remarks and attacks due to the COVID-19 pandemic and politically polarized sources. Additionally, whereas exposure to these inequities can create trauma that is carried for entire lives and rob individuals of physical and mental health, resulting in dramatically lowered life expectancy with many higher risks, including heart disease, stroke, diabetes, obesity, and mental illnesses. And whereas the Salt Lake City Council and Mayor believe we have a moral imperative to combat racism, discrimination, and inequities in all its manifestations. And whereas the only way to truly address this public health and moral crisis is in our community by first acknowledging and understanding the inequities that are ingrained into our systems, both public and private, and purposefully as well as intentionally working our way out of it, resulting in improved health measures for our entire community. And whereas Governor Cox, including Mayor Mendenhall, have signed a Utah Compact on Racial Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And whereas leaders from Utah's healthcare organizations have declared systematic racism a threat to the health of patients, families, and communities through economic and resource inequities, which result in poor health outcomes. And whereas Salt Lake City has recently moved forward with elevating the role of Chief Equity Officer to a senior staff level position, regularly advising the mayor on issues of equity. And whereas Salt Lake City has recently moved forward to develop a citywide equity plan with a goal to methodically go through all of its practices and policies and remove barriers to access government and those that compound inequities to this day. And whereas Salt Lake City includes in its 2021 goals a plan to mitigate gentrification so that our city can remain the home of those who wish to preserve our neighborhoods and communities. And whereas Salt Lake City formed the Commission on Racial Equity and Policing to address traumatic inequities experienced by communities of color through community policing. And whereas Salt Lake City remains committed to the work that it will take now into the future to dismantle our racist legacies so that all feel welcomed and safe in Salt Lake City. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Salt Lake City Council and Mayor as follows. I believe I'll conclude there with the resolution in this public meeting. And if anyone has any specific questions on adding or reforming any language usage, please feel free to contact me in quorum with the correct representatives. Let me know if you need me to share anything else with that, Josh. Before I do that real quick, I'm actually going to give you guys a little more background into that as well.
Yeah, please help. And I know Commissioner Shiplet had a suggestion earlier, and I'll let others give you input as well, Commissioner Powell, but just to be clear, the document is looking to be finalized in a couple weeks, so we will have space on the full commission meeting to discuss it. Is that correct?
Yes. So our goal is to have this up for discussion at our main commission meeting this following week on the 7th, in which I'm hoping that a large portion of the commission has had a chance to review this and to send in their individual revisions, which will be finalized by the group that is ultimately brought this resolution forward. The White Coats for Black Lives Matter at the University of Utah. And they're a group of grad students there that have actually worked to introduce House Joint Resolution 13 at the state level, which lacked, with Representative Hollins, but lacked a significant amount of bipartisan support, and negotiations thus failed at the state level, resulting in us trying to put this resolution forward with some language revisions at the city level, in hopes that surrounding cities will follow this lead and community organization effort. And that way we could put more pressure on other state representatives with that citywide support. So we're essentially trying to really work through our grassroots campaigning. And it's like getting people informed on this resolution, but before it's ultimately passed, and we expect zero pushback from the city and the city council. We actually expect that they're going to do what they can to get this done as soon as possible. And that, relating to that, I'm hoping our commission, everyone can get that reviewed. We can even form emergency meeting sessions before next Wednesday, as long as we can fit quorum if anyone else is interested. But Ephraim and I have been working really hard on this with the help of Weston Clark from the city, who's been very supportive and guiding us through this process. So we believe Mayor Mendenhall is going to be in support of this as well. So is there any other questions real quick?
Thank you, Commissioner Powell. When you asked if people had read it, I know you're on your phone and probably can't see everyone. From what I saw, majority, if not all, hands went up, and which is very positive, awesome. I love that. I see the passion and that they have read it and seen it. So they might, I think our subcommittee here might have some specific recommendations. I know Commissioner Shiflett does, and then she won't have to worry about emailing you a redlined document.
I would love that. That's fun. That's perfect.
It's not that
I
red.
apologize for being so late, my fellow commissioners as well. I'm sorry. I was turning in my tax information at the post office.
Well done, Commissioner Powell. All right, so I'd put your questions back to the subcommittee if they have input, and then I'd ask Shafin and Dr. Singh, who have also seen it, if they have comments or opinions, or have seen nationwide or in LA anything similar, or want to ask questions of the group. So subcommittee comments.
I'm going to say this is really good. It's not that red line, just so you know. There were two comments in there that kind of was unsettling when we used the word that things were heightened through the global pandemic. I don't know if we got to be politically correct or not, because I don't think the pandemic heightened things. I think it was the leadership of this country. Now, I don't know if you can put that in there, if you can't put that in there, but that's just my opinion. I think we use COVID for everything. Oh, it's because of COVID. Well, there were a lot of other factors that played a role in where we are in this country. And the second one was when you talked about mitigate gentrification. When I looked up the word mitigate, the first thing you see is alleviate, and that's perfect. But then you look at reduce, diminish, lessen, weaken, and take off edge. That does not mean to me that they are fully looking at gentrification. That means that they have words that they can work with. And so those were really my only two comments on that, I think. I did read it all. Those are my only two right now.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I appreciate those. I made sure to highlight those real quick, Commissioner Shiflett, and I'll make sure I email you back in quorum to further discuss where you would like to maybe see changes in that. When it comes to the leadership position, what is your end goal in wanting to, is it where at which level of government are you concerned with the leadership performed during the pandemic? I should clarify.
I'm not sure when you say what do you mean? Who am I
Like,
concerned
is it
with?
here locally in terms of leadership that's heightened the impact, or
Oh, I'm sorry, nationally. The leadership
national?
nationally and locally, you know, because we are in a heavily Republican state that was not speaking up about some of the injustices that were going on. And so you can say both, actually. I also wanted to know if you have met with Dr. Valerie Flatus at the University of Utah.
I have not. The group I'm working with perhaps may have, but we should definitely interlink that. Would you be able to send me their personal information?
I can. She's someone that is moving up and doing equity and diversity at the University Hospital. I'm not sure specifically with nursing, but I will introduce you to via email.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Commissioner Shiflett.
Can I speak to what Commissioner Shiflett just said? This is Darlene, and I apologize. I am now in my car. I had to leave my house. But I agree with Commissioner Shiflett regarding the leadership of the country is what drove the conversation to where it is right now with the xenophobia against Asian Americans as it relates to the coronavirus pandemic. And that trickled down to local leadership because of the fear of backlash. So somehow, some way, I don't know how that could be brought up without politicizing it too much. I don't even know if it's even possible to do so. I just don't know.
In some ways, we can talk about words matter, public messaging matters, what leaders of this country in elected positions says matter. Commissioner MJ Powell, thank you. Two comments very quickly, and I know our time is there. One, this is a lot of do it, so we appreciate all the work that went into it. We look forward to hearing everybody else's comments. The version you were reading may be slightly different than the one we got, so I want to make sure we all have the updated version. For example, Asian American community, that's the last sentence of the highlighted version I've got. You read Asian American community being affected by the rise in xenophobic remarks and attacks due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And the one I have is only remark, not even remarks, and no attacks in it. So there's a little difference there. And also there are a couple of grammatical things that I'm happy to suggest to you privately, nothing big. But I just wanted to applaud whoever is working on it, in addition to you, for the work that you've put into this. Shafin?
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm thinking about it in terms of like, wow, I see it's a lot of work went into it. And again, I'll be succinct because I know we're over time. Two things come to mind for me. You know, you're in a conservative state, so now everybody's going to agree with what you're saying. And so that's just what it is, and that's okay. I think that in here you have like some statistics when you talk about COVID and these kind of things. In other areas, you make statements, you know, without, like, you know, there are statements that we may all agree on this call, or maybe we don't all agree on the call, but some people will agree that that's factual, but, you know, others may need a bit more data to support that. So I wonder if maybe an addendum, not saying, you know, because this has to be succinct, and I know there's a format, but maybe some addendum that kind of can speak to the literature that talks about the outcomes that you're referring to and all the disparities and all the things that you're stating as fact could help, you know, support where you know, what you're trying to convey. But I think it's well done, and, you know, thank you for sharing. Yeah.
Love that comment. Thank you, Shafin. Josh?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Singh, and thank you, Shafin. Was that helpful, MJ? And again, if you resend the updated version, any of the commissioners, I'm sure, and what I'm hearing, Shafin and Dr. Singh are willing to take another look at it and give additional input and being part of moving it forward.
Yeah, that was all extremely helpful, and I appreciate it. I'm sorry, I'm like scribbling away like 12 thoughts at once right now.
Well, we did record this call just for you,
Perfect.
Commissioner
Thank
Powell.
you. Appreciate it. Is Ephraim here right now? No, I don't believe so. He's really busy with University of Utah things. So essentially, I wanted to emphasize on the call too, what we're hoping to do, right, as well as like as a commission, like this document is mainly going to address racism as it relates to a public health perspective. And so going back to Mr. Roberts' statements of how we can provide more literature and statistical language usage to support the arguments I'm making in this resolution are going to be critical in ensuring that although there may not be any anticipated pushback on the bill, that it is fair in a conservative state with different beliefs that to support thus opinions and statements. So we'll make sure we get that interpreted as well, and maybe even added on to this resolution officially. That'll be one of my main requests to the other group. And then additionally, as you said, someone else said earlier about leadership as it relates to the national government. I don't want to displace the concerns there. My only concern would be behind, as we know, words are important. So like when it comes to the gentrification and mitigation aspect, now I'm seeing a lot more loose language interpretation that I wasn't seeing before. But when I think of maybe trying not to politically polarize the document, I want to do so in a way that maybe even kind of reflects the current executive branch's way on how they've been moving forward from the past administration's responses. And I don't feel like Biden's really acknowledged a lot of Trump things while he's been in office. And I think for us to remain objective, maybe not even including anything about lack of leadership, but maybe is just the lack of the system response as a whole, because I think that would then intend to apply that now that that leadership's been replaced, now that things are fixed, as to where we're not declaring this resolution because we think things are fixed, but that they actually need to be refined as a whole or reinvented. And so I'm more leaning towards just keeping it public health based instead of anything else added to that. Because if you can see is somewhere in some points of the document, we were talking about things such as whereas Salt Lake City has recently moved forward to develop a citywide equity plan. That's something that we can objectively meet as a commission. Additionally, there were standards where we were listed in this as well, where it says, whereas Salt Lake City formed the Commission on Racial Equity and Policing to address traumatic inequities experienced by communities of color through community policing. And so I want to make sure we're all aligning there as a subcommittee real quick. Does that sound correct as towards what we're trying to accomplish as a commission in presenting this resolution? And I'll repeat it one more time. Whereas Salt Lake City formed the Commission on Racial Equity and Policing to address traumatic inequities experienced by communities of color through community policing.
And so you're asking, Commissioner Powell, is that adequately stated? You're asking the subcommittee members if there are any recommendations, send them to you specific to that language, right?
Yeah, that one in particular, just because I want to make sure that I'm communicating the intent of the entire commission as a whole correctly in presenting this resolution. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Due to the interest of time, I'd say any further recommendations or discussion of that document before next Wednesday, contact Commissioner Powell or email him. And as he asked, specific to those sections and areas would be helpful to him. I've taken some notes here. I think that's excellent input. Also, MJ, Commissioner Powell, you can send back the revision. I hear Chaffin and Subcommittee willing to review it again. In relation to earlier agenda items, I've got that your ideas, thoughts on what a transition looked like, and I'll pass them on to the city for that agenda item. That the full commission, in addition to the request to understand more about the racial equity director position and what that role might look like and when it might be filled. I also have the recommendation from the subcommittee to have a deeper conversation or listening session with law enforcement and this commission, similar to the first hour of our discussion, and some of those issues, particularly around policing in our country and where we are. And then next subcommittee, work with Chief to set up to have the discussion on those two buckets or the two items on mental health and a co-response program. Anything else to add to that, Chaffin or Subcommittee, that I might not have caught or that are bigger themes coming out of it, or your thoughts in general?
I mean, I think that's, no, I think you captured that quite well, Joshua. Nothing really more from me at this point, so thank you.
I have one quick comment if Mr. MJ is still here. For the resolution, you may want to see the intent of the document, how much you are trying to achieve. Just something to think about the last 5 points you are leading them with, which is, therefore, it is resolved by the Salt Lake City Council and Mayor. After that, all the 5 points, they're very general in nature. And you want to think if you want to give any specific example for even one of those points so as to see what the next steps might be. Because sometimes when we leave things very general, we don't get things accomplished. So if we say we commit to look internally, externally, encourage our who reside, work on businesses, how so? How do we do it? How do we dismantle racist legacies? Just a suggestion, take it if it's worth it, if not. I want to thank everybody today for your openness, your vulnerability. I just feel like a family to be here. So I'm sorry we did not get to the agenda we set in the beginning, but it felt like there's a force in the room that we wanted to work with, and I'm fortunate to be part of that conversation. I personally learned a lot, so I thank you all.
Thank you, seriously. Yeah, thank you guys for your openness. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all. I want to thank them because every time I feel like we're taking up your time because we get off topic. So thank you for saying those 2 comments.
Yeah, Commissioner Andrew Weirden, any final thoughts? Again, I know you well enough. You're leaning in either to hit leave or to make a comment.
No, I just appreciate the work done and coming together and the professionalism you, Josh, and our other facilitators bring to the table for healthy dialogues. And again, it's a privilege to be a part of this. So I thank you all.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Andrew Weirden. Thank you, everyone. I am going to go out that door as soon as we're done and tell my family about this experience and educate them and work towards a better future. And appreciate all of you guys. And we'll move these agenda items we've identified forward, and other agenda items we had. I know Chief Brown and Doubt would like to be on the call there with their families, but we're talking about the next meeting already and setting that up to help us make informed decisions. So I'll look forward to that, keeping things rolling. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank the officers for joining. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you all.